All right, let's dive deep today into a classic, actually, a Harvard Business Review article called The Core Competence of the Corporation.
Oh, yeah, I know this one.
It's from way back in 1990.
Hmm.
But you know what? The ideas, they're still surprisingly relevant today, even more so now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What we're going to do today is break down how companies can really cultivate those unique skills and resources that end up leading to that lasting success. Think of it like we're going to try to uncover the secret sauce of growth beyond just making products.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this article goes beyond just the surface level stuff. It digs into what makes a company stand out in a way that's like really hard for competitors to just copy.
Right. And we're going to see this play out in some really interesting company comparisons like GTE versus NEC
Oh, yeah? Go
or
ahead.
Canon versus Xerox. What's so interesting is they all kind of started in the same place, with similar resources, but ended up in very different places, some thriving, some really struggling. And that's the puzzle we're going to be solving today. So let's rewind the clock a bit. Let's go back to the early 1980s. Picture this. GTE and NEC, both of them in similar positions, kind of dabbling in all sorts of tech businesses, a very diverse range.
Hmm.
Where did things go from there?
Well, fast forward to 1988, and the picture's completely different. NEC is like this global powerhouse,
Wow.
leading the way in
Yeah.
semiconductors and, making huge waves in telecommunications and computers.
Yeah.
But GTE, on the other hand, had to, well, scale back their operations quite a bit.
So same starting point, but drastically different outcomes. What happened? What made the difference?
Well, the key difference was NEC's focus
Yeah.
on developing what this article calls core competencies.
Okay.
And these are basically the underlying skills and knowledge that fueled their growth across all these different markets. It's like, imagine you're a really skilled baker.
Okay.
You understand all the core concepts
Mm.
measurements, mixing techniques, how temperature affects things. And that knowledge allows you to create a whole bunch of delicious things, from cakes and cookies to breads. You might not be like a specialist in any one specific type of baking, but your core competency in baking gives you this amazing foundation to excel in all those areas.
I see. So NEC was focused on building that solid foundation, those baking skills. What was GTE doing?
Well, GTE was more like a collection of separate businesses. They were kind of missing out on the synergy and shared learning that comes from developing core competencies. They were really fixated on individual products and missed that bigger picture.
And that's where this whole idea of rethinking the corporation comes in, right?
Right.
This article is saying just focusing on those specific product markets, it's not enough. Companies need to be more adaptable, constantly innovating.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where the article throws down the gauntlet, so to speak.
Yeah.
It challenges, especially Western companies, traditional ways of thinking and saying, hey, look inward. Sometimes the problem isn't external factors. Maybe it's how your business is structured and managed.
So NEC, they had this vision. They could see the future. They saw this convergence of computing and communications, this CNC, they called it, and they just went for it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
They really strategically focused on building up their competence in semiconductors.
Right.
In order to achieve that vision, they even formed this, get this, a CNC committee. And they actively sought out partnerships to learn faster.
Wow. That's interesting. What about GTE? Were they doing anything similar?
No, not really.
Yeah.
They were missing that cohesive vision. And their decentralized structure actually got in the way. It hindered their ability to focus on these like really crucial competencies. They weren't as agile, not as forward-thinking as NEC was.
That's where it all went wrong. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into this whole core competence idea. The article uses this really interesting analogy of a tree to explain it. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So picture a company as a tree, right?
Yeah.
The end products, the stuff they sell to customers, those are the leaves, the flowers, the fruit. The different departments or divisions, those are like the branches.
Okay.
Then you have the core products. The key components that go into the final products, those are like the trunk and the major limbs, and then holding it all together at the very base is the root system. These roots, those are the core competencies, that often unseen source of nourishment and stability. Build the tree.
That's such a great way to visualize this. So core competencies are kind of like the company's DNA, shaping what that company is capable of becoming.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great way to put it. It's that collective knowledge, the expertise within an organization, the ability to coordinate skills from different places and master these technologies. It's all about being adaptable, ready to respond when the market shifts.
So can you give us some like real world examples of companies that have really nailed this core competence thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Take Sony, for example. They have this, like, incredible mastery of miniaturization.
Right.
And that's not just some random skill they picked up. It's like woven into their DNA.
Right.
This core competence allowed them to create the Walkman, which, like, totally revolutionized the music industry.
Yeah.
Later on, that same competence helped them dominate the digital camera market.
Right.
Then you have companies like Philips,
Yeah.
known for their expertise in optical media,
Right.
or 3M, masters of adhesives and coatings. These companies didn't just accidentally wander into these areas. They strategically cultivated these competencies,
Mhm.
over time.
It's amazing to see how all these like seemingly very different products, they all come from the same core strength. But the article does warn us. It cautions against some common misconceptions about these core competencies. What are some of the traps that companies should try to avoid?
Yeah. Well, one big mistake is thinking that core competence is just about outspending everyone else on R&D. Just throwing money at research and development. That's not a guarantee of success.
Right.
It's also not simply about sharing costs between different parts of the company. That might make you more efficient, but it doesn't necessarily build true competence.
So it's not just about having the resources, it's about how you use them, making these deliberate choices, focusing on where you want to build deep expertise, and then creating a culture that values and nourishes those competencies.
You got it.
The article gives us three key tests to help identify a core competence. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. The first test is, can this competence be applied across multiple markets?
Oh, interesting.
This kind of shows you how versatile it is and potentially powerful. The second test is, does it actually contribute to something customers value
Mm.
in the final product? It can't just be some internal thing. It needs to translate into a real benefit for the people buying your products. And finally, and this is maybe the most important one, is it difficult to copy?
Ooh.
A core competence should be this complex mix of skills and knowledge that sets you apart from the competition, something they can't just easily replicate.
So like a checklist for companies trying to get that strategic edge.
Yeah.
But the article highlights a critical risk here, outsourcing. Can you explain why that can be so dangerous?
Well, outsourcing can be tempting
Hmm?
because, it has that potential for cost savings,
Right.
but it can backfire,
Yeah.
especially when you're outsourcing key components that are part of your core competencies.
Yeah.
You might save money in the short term, but you risk becoming reliant on other companies and losing that hard-won competitive edge.
It's like giving away the secret recipe.
Exactly. A perfect analogy. The article uses the example of Chrysler. They decided to outsource their engine production, basically handing over a core element of their business.
Wow.
Compare that to Honda. For Honda, engines are like this core product
Yeah.
that they've very carefully developed and controlled over the years. They understand the strategic value of owning that expertise.
That's a really great comparison. So we've talked about how companies can identify and nurture their core competencies, but how do they actually put them to work, across all the different teams and projects?
Well, the article says core competencies should be treated as a valuable resource that you can allocate
Hmm.
and redeploy as needed
Yeah.
across the entire organization.
Hmm.
It's about breaking down those silos
Right.
and making sure expertise isn't trapped within specific departments.
So instead of hoarding talent, companies should think of those experts as like an internal consulting team.
Yeah, exactly. Available to lend their skills to projects that really need them.
Hmm. That's interesting.
The article even suggests that different teams or departments should bid for access to these competencies.
Oh, wow.
They make a case for why their project deserves the investment. Imagine a system where the most promising, most strategically important initiatives, they get priority access to the top talent, regardless of what department they're in.
That's a pretty radical shift from the way things are usually done, where, each department hoards their best people.
Yeah, it is. And it requires a change in how we think about rewards and career progression too. So instead of just focusing on, individual performance or departmental performance, we need to incentivize collaboration,
Hmm.
knowledge sharing across the organization. Recognize and reward those people who are willing to share their expertise and help other teams succeed.
So it's about creating a culture where people aren't punished for sharing, they're actually celebrated for it.
Yeah.
Their contributions to the company's overall success are recognized, even if it means they're temporarily helping out another team.
Precisely. Creating a sense of shared purpose, collective success, Everyone understands they're working towards the same goal.
The article also talks about the downsides of the traditional way of doing things, the strategic business unit model, or SBU model. Can you explain how that structure can actually hinder the development and use of these core competencies?
Well, the SBU model, while often pretty effective for managing large organizations, with lots of moving parts, it can sometimes create these, like, barriers to collaboration
Mm-hmm.
and knowledge sharing. The emphasis on individual business unit performance can lead to kind of a short-term focus
Mm-hmm.
and unwillingness to share resources or expertise.
Right. So instead of thinking about the company as a whole, people are more focused on their own little piece of the pie.
Exactly. And that can lead to what the article calls imprisoned resources, where talented individuals are, like, stuck working on the same things over and over again, even though their skills could be way more valuable elsewhere.
Can you give me like a real-world example of this imprisoned resources problem?
Yeah, sure. Imagine you have this company. They have this amazing team of software developers working on, let's say, a specific product line.
Okay.
Those developers have this deep understanding of a particular programming language or platform. That could be so valuable to other teams working on different projects.
Right.
But because of the SBU structure, those developers are essentially trapped within their own unit, unable to really contribute their expertise more broadly.
So instead of this free flow of knowledge and expertise, you just have these pockets of brilliance that are being underutilized.
Yeah, exactly. And that can really stifle innovation and limit the company's growth.
It sounds like the core competence perspective forces companies to break down those walls
Yeah.
and think more holistically about how to leverage their talent.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the real competitive advantage comes not just from the skills of individuals, but the company's ability to connect those skills,
Mm.
share knowledge, and leverage that collective expertise,
Mm.
to achieve those big strategic goals.
So it's a real shift in perspective. The SBU model focuses on competition between the different products or business units, whereas the core competence model encourages, a much more collaborative and integrated approach.
Right. And this shift requires a conscious effort from leadership. They need to really champion this new way of thinking, communicate it clearly, and put the right systems and processes in place to support it.
This makes me think of those companies that have those internal mobility programs where they encourage people to move between different roles. Seems like that kind of culture would be essential for this.
Yeah, absolutely. When employees have that opportunity to work on different projects, experience different parts of the business, they gain a much broader understanding of how the company operates.
Right.
And they're better able to identify opportunities to, apply their skills in new and innovative ways.
It's like cross-pollinating ideas and expertise.
Exactly.
It seems like the core competence approach is all about breaking down those traditional silos
Yeah,
and creating a more fluid and dynamic environment.
you're exactly right. The lines between different departments and functions are becoming so blurred now.
Mm.
Companies need to be more adaptable, more responsive to change.
Yeah.
And that requires a workforce that can move seamlessly between roles.
This article doesn't just tell us about the problems with the old ways of thinking. It offers solutions too.
Right.
It gives us this framework for how companies can transition from, this product-centric to a competence-centric organization.
And it's a framework that's just as relevant today as it was back then. In fact, I'd argue even more important now,
Right.
given how fast technology is changing and the increasing complexity of the global business environment.
So what are the key takeaways here? What can companies actually do to embrace this core competence model?
Well, the first step is, figure out what your core competencies are.
Right.
What are those unique skills, that knowledge, that really set your company apart from the competition? Once you've identified them, then you need to develop a strategic architecture.
Yep.
It's like a roadmap for how you're going to leverage those competencies to achieve your long-term goals. This involves making some tough choices about where to focus resources, what projects to prioritize, what partnerships to pursue.
It sounds like it requires a real shift in mindset, moving away from that short-term thinking and focusing on building those capabilities for the future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that investing in core competencies, it's not just a cost. It's an investment in your company's long-term success.
It's like planting seeds today that
Yeah.
will grow into a thriving forest in the future.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And it shows how important patience is
Hmm.
and that long-term vision. when it comes to building these core competencies.
This has been such a insightful conversation, about how companies can create this sustainable competitive advantage
Mm.
by focusing on their core competencies. But what about the people within these companies? What does this all mean for them?
Hmm. That's a great question, and one that we should definitely explore.
Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about that individual perspective. How can people apply these principles to their own careers, their own development? This article focuses on companies, but I feel like these ideas definitely apply to us as individuals too.
Oh, absolutely. In many ways, individuals are like mini companies.
Right.
We have our own unique skills and talents,
Yeah.
our own personal brand, you could say, and our own career goals. Just like companies need to figure out their core competencies, individuals need to do the same if they want to succeed in the long term.
So instead of just focusing on our current job title, or our responsibilities,
Right.
we need to think about those underlying skills and knowledge
Yeah.
that make us valuable and marketable. It's like we need to be thinking, what are my core competencies?
Exactly. What are you uniquely good at? What skills have you built up over time? And just as importantly, are you nurturing them?
Mhm.
Are you developing those competencies? Or are you letting them kind of just sit there?
This reminds me of something a mentor once told me. He said, don't define yourself by your job title. Define yourself by your skills and abilities.
Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Because your job title, that can change. The company you work for, that can change. Even the industry you're in can completely change. But those core competencies, those stick with you throughout your whole career. They're the foundation for a successful and fulfilling career.
It's about being adaptable, being agile,
Yeah,
ready to pivot and evolve as the world changes around us.
precisely. And being proactive. Don't wait for someone to tell you what skills to develop. Take ownership of your own career. Make a conscious effort to identify and build those competencies that'll set you apart.
So it's like building your own personal brand
Yeah.
based on your unique strengths and expertise. What are some practical steps people can take to do that?
Well, the first thing is to take stock.
Mm.
What are your skills? What are you already good at? What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing? Once you understand your strengths, then you can start thinking about how to use them to achieve those career goals.
It's like creating a personal strategic architecture, a roadmap for how you're going to develop your skills and advance your career. This is really resonating with me. I'm starting to see how these core competence principles, they can be applied not just to companies, but to our own careers.
Yeah,
Our
exactly.
individual journeys.
And just like companies need to be careful about outsourcing, individuals need to be careful about becoming too reliant on a single employer or a single skill set.
That's interesting.
We got to keep learning, keep growing, keep expanding our repertoire of competencies to stay relevant, especially in this job market.
It's like diversifying your portfolio, but instead of stocks and bonds, we're talking about skills and knowledge.
Exactly. The more diverse your skill set, the more adaptable you'll be, more resilient, when things change.
This conversation has really shifted my perspective on career development.
Mm.
It's not just about climbing the ladder in one company. It's about building this portable skill set that can take you anywhere you want to go.
And it's about taking ownership
Yeah.
of your own career.
Mm.
Don't wait for opportunities to just fall into your lap.
Yeah.
Go create your own opportunities by identifying and developing those core competencies.
This is so empowering. It's like taking control of your own destiny, shaping your own future
Yeah.
based on your strengths, your passions. This article we're discussing, it might be over 30 years old, but these ideas are timeless and incredibly relevant to anyone who wants to build a successful career and really a fulfilling life.
I couldn't agree more. In this world where things change so fast, that ability to adapt, learn, and evolve, it's essential. And it all starts with understanding and developing your core competencies.
This has been such a fantastic conversation. We've covered so much from, the strategic importance of core competencies for companies to, how they play out in our own personal lives.
Wow.
And career development.
Yeah.
We've explored these challenges, the opportunities of, identifying and developing those core competencies in a world that's changing faster than ever. But before we wrap up, I want to hear your thoughts on one more question. In this age of AI, automation, all this rapid tech change, how do we even know what competencies will be valuable in the future?
That's the question, isn't it? That's what everybody wants to know, whether you're a CEO planning for the next decade or someone just starting their career.
It feels like we need a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But seriously, any clues from the article?
Well, the article doesn't talk about AI directly, But it really stresses adaptability
Yeah.
and foresight. The companies that succeed, they're not just reacting, they're anticipating what's coming next.
So how do we do that? How do we anticipate those competencies we need when the world is changing so fast?
It starts with paying attention. Being aware of the big trends shaping the world around us. We talked about the growing importance of those human skills. Creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, those will always be valuable, no matter how advanced technology gets.
Because those are things machines can't do. At least not yet. It's what makes us human.
Exactly. And it's not just about having those skills. It's about constantly getting better at them. The future will reward those who are lifelong learners, always seeking out new knowledge, adapting to new challenges.
Like the article talks about a strategic architecture for companies. Maybe we each need one for ourselves.
I love that. A personal strategic architecture. It's about thinking critically about where you're strong, where you need to grow, being proactive, looking for opportunities to learn and develop.
This deep dive has been such an eye-opener. It's changed how I think about success. Long-term success, it's not about what you know now. It's about your capacity to learn and adapt and evolve. It's about developing those core competencies that'll make you irreplaceable, no matter what happens in the future.
And it's about the journey. It's not a destination. The world of work is constantly changing. And so should we. Embrace the challenge, stay curious, keep learning.
What's so exciting is this article focuses on businesses, but it gives us this framework for thinking about our own personal growth,
Hmm.
being intentional about the skills we build, recognizing that they're not just job requirements, they're valuable assets that we carry with us throughout our lives.
That's the beauty of it, these timeless principles.
Mm.
They go beyond specific industries or job titles. It's about cultivating a mindset of continuous learning and growth.
Well, on that note, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive for today.
Right.
We've explored core competencies from every angle,
Mhm.
from corporate strategy to, individual growth and development. We've analyzed those case studies, debated different approaches, and hopefully sparked some new ideas for our listeners.
It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations. I hope our listeners have too.
We've covered a lot, but the most important thing is for our listeners to walk away feeling empowered. No matter what challenges they face, what the future holds, their core competencies are a source of strength and resilience.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing those strengths, nurturing them, and using them to, navigate this crazy world.
Beautifully said. Embrace your core competencies, stay curious, and never stop learning. That's how you thrive.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today. We'll be back next week with another thought-provoking exploration. Until then, keep diving deep.
Sounds good. It's about looking beyond just the products you're selling today and thinking about the skills and knowledge that'll drive your success 5, 10, even 20 years down the line.
So it's like creating this blueprint, for how to leverage those core competencies to shape the company's future. This
Right.
is where leadership comes in, right?
Absolutely. Senior management, they have to articulate that strategic architecture. Make sure everyone's on the same page. It's not just about dictating products. It's setting a direction for building competencies that will keep the company relevant in the long run.
Got it. So can you give me an example of a company that did this well?
Yeah. The article talks about Vickers, this power and motion control company. They took a proactive approach. They used strategic architecture to anticipate what customers would need in the future and how technology would shift. And this led them to make these really strategic acquisitions and focus their internal development in a way that aligned with their long-term vision. They weren't just reacting, they were shaping the market.
It's like they were playing chess, thinking several moves ahead while their competitors were still playing checkers.
I like that analogy. It really highlights how important it is, not just to identify your core competencies, but also to understand how they fit into the evolving market. Where are the opportunities? What are the threats? And how can you use your competencies to stay ahead of the curve?
Okay, so we've got these core competencies. We've got our strategic architecture mapped out. Now what? How do companies actually put those competencies to work across all their different teams and projects?
Well, the article says, treat those core competencies like a valuable resource that you can allocate and redeploy as needed throughout the organization. It's all about breaking down silos and making sure that expertise isn't trapped within specific departments.
So instead of each department hoarding its talent, companies should think of their experts as this internal consulting team.
Yes, available to lend their skills to the projects that need them most.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
The article actually suggests that different teams or departments should bid for access to these competencies.
Oh, wow.
Make a case for why their project deserves that investment. Imagine a system where the most promising initiatives, the most strategically important ones, they get priority access to the company's best talent, no matter what department those people are in.
That's a huge shift from the traditional model, where departments protect their best people.
It is. And it requires a change in how we reward people, how we think about career progression. Instead of focusing on individual performance or just departmental performance, we need to incentivize collaboration, sharing knowledge across the organization, recognize and reward those who are willing to share, and help other teams succeed.
So creating a culture where people aren't afraid to share their knowledge, where they're actually celebrated for it.
Right. Their contributions to the company's success are recognized, even if it means they're temporarily lending their skills to another team.
Exactly. Creating a sense of shared purpose, collective success, where everyone understands they're all working towards the same goal. The article also talks about this traditional strategic business unit model, the SBU model. Can you explain how that structure can actually hinder the development and use of core competencies?
The SBU model can be good, for managing large organizations, but it can also create barriers to collaboration, to knowledge sharing. That emphasis on individual business unit performance. It can lead to a really short-term focus, and sometimes an unwillingness to share resources or expertise.
So instead of thinking about the company as a whole, people start prioritizing their own little department.
Exactly. And that can lead to what the article calls imprisoned resources, where talented people are stuck doing the same things over and over, even though their skills could be used in so many other ways.
Can you give me a real-world example of this imprisoned resources problem?
Sure. Imagine a company with a team of brilliant software developers. They're working on a specific product line. Let's say they have deep knowledge of a certain programming language or a platform. That could be incredibly valuable to other teams.
Right.
But because of that SBU structure, they're essentially trapped within their unit, unable to share that expertise with the rest of the organization.
So instead of this free flow of knowledge, you've got these isolated pockets of brilliance that aren't being fully utilized.
Exactly. And that can stifle innovation and limit the company's growth.
It sounds like the core competence perspective forces companies to break down those walls, think more holistically about how to use their talent.
Yes. It's about recognizing that the real advantage isn't just in the skills of individual people, but in the company's ability to connect those skills, to share knowledge, and leverage that collective expertise to achieve those big strategic goals.
So it's really a fundamental shift in perspective. The SBU model focuses on competition between products or business units, whereas the core competence model encourages a more collaborative and integrated approach.
Exactly. And this shift requires leadership. They need to be the champions of this new way of thinking. They need to communicate it clearly, put in place the systems and processes that will support it.
This makes me think of companies with those internal mobility programs, where they encourage employees to move between different roles and departments. It seems like that kind of culture would be really important for this.
Absolutely. When people have the opportunity to work on different projects and experience different parts of the business, they gain a much broader understanding of how everything works. And they're better able to see opportunities to apply their skills in new ways.
It's like cross-pollinating ideas and expertise across the entire organization.
Exactly.
It seems like the core competence approach is all about breaking down those traditional silos, creating a more fluid and dynamic work environment.
You're right. The lines between departments are getting blurrier all the time. Companies need to be more adaptable, more responsive. And that requires a workforce that can move seamlessly between different roles and responsibilities.
The article doesn't just highlight the problems with traditional management thinking. It gives us solutions. It gives us a framework for how companies can make this transition from a product-centric to a competence-centric organization.
And that framework is still relevant today. In fact, I'd argue even more relevant now than it was back in 1990.
Given how fast the world is changing.
Exactly, with all the technological changes and the increasing complexity of the global business environment.
So what are the key takeaways here? What are the practical steps that companies can take to embrace this core competence model?
Well, the first step is to identify your core competencies. Figure out what those unique skills and knowledge are, the things that really set your company apart. Once you've identified them, you need to develop that strategic architecture, like a roadmap for how you're going to use those competencies to achieve your long-term goals.
It sounds like it requires a real shift in mindset, moving away from short-term thinking and really focusing on building those capabilities for the future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that investing in those core competencies, it's not just a cost, it's an investment in your company's long-term success.
It's like planting those seeds today that will grow into a thriving forest down the road.
I like that analogy,
Mm.
and it really emphasizes the importance of patience, of having that long-term vision when it comes to building core competencies.
This has been such an insightful discussion about how companies can create that sustainable competitive advantage by focusing on their core competencies.
But what about the individuals within those companies? What does all of this mean for them?
That's a great question, a really important one. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about that individual perspective. How can people apply these principles to their own careers, to their own development? This article is about companies, but I think these ideas apply to all of us as individuals too.
Oh, absolutely. In many ways, we're all like mini companies.
Right.
We have our own unique skills and talents, our own personal brand, you could say,
Yeah.
and our own career goals. Just like companies need to figure out their core competencies, individuals need to do the same if they want to achieve long-term success.
So instead of just focusing on our current job title or our specific responsibilities, we need to think about those underlying skills. The knowledge that makes us valuable, makes us marketable.
Exactly. What are you uniquely good at? What skills and knowledge have you developed over time? The things that could be applied in different situations. And just as importantly, are you nurturing those competencies? Are you developing them? Or are you letting them stagnate?
This reminds me of something a mentor told me once. He said, "Don't define yourself by your job title. Define yourself by your skills and abilities."
That is such good advice because your job title can change. The company you work for can change. Even the whole industry you're in can change. But those core competencies, they'll stick with you. They're the foundation for building a successful career, a fulfilling career.
It's all about being adaptable, being agile, ready to pivot and evolve as the world around us changes.
Exactly. And it's about being proactive. Don't wait for someone to tell you what skills to develop. Take ownership of your own career. Make a conscious effort to build those competencies, the ones that will set you apart.
So it's like building your own personal brand
Exactly.
based on your unique strengths, your expertise. So what are some practical steps people can take to do that?
Well, the first step is to take stock of what you already have. What are your skills? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing? Once you have a good understanding of your strengths, you can start thinking about how to use them to achieve your career goals.
It's like creating a personal strategic architecture, a roadmap for how you're going to develop those skills and advance your career. You know what? This is really resonating with me. I'm starting to see how these core competence principles, they apply not to companies, but to our own careers, to our individual journeys.
And just like companies need to be careful about outsourcing, individuals need to be careful about becoming too reliant on a single employer or a single set of skills.
That's an interesting point.
We need to keep learning, keep growing, expanding that repertoire of competencies to stay relevant in this job market. That's changing all the time.
It's like diversifying your portfolio, but instead of stocks and bonds, it's about skills and knowledge.
Exactly. The more diverse your skill set is, the more adaptable you'll be, the more resilient you'll be when changes come along.
This conversation has really changed how I think about career development.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about climbing that ladder in one company. It's about building a skill set that can take you anywhere you want to go.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it's about taking ownership. Don't wait for someone to hand you opportunities. You have the power to create your own opportunities.
Yeah.
By identifying and developing those core competencies, that will make you a valuable asset to any organization.
This is so empowering. It's about taking control of your own destiny, shaping your own future based on your strengths and passions. This article we're talking about, it might be over 30 years old.
Yeah.
But these ideas are timeless and incredibly relevant to anyone who wants to build a successful career and a fulfilling life.
I completely agree. In a world that's changing so quickly, that ability to adapt, to learn, to evolve, it's more important than ever.
Absolutely.
And it all starts with understanding and developing your core competencies.
This has been such a great conversation. We've covered so much, from the strategic importance of core competencies for companies to how those ideas play out in our own personal and professional lives. We've talked about the challenges and opportunities of identifying and developing those core competencies in a world that's changing faster than ever before.
It has been a really interesting discussion.
But before we wrap up, I want to hear your thoughts on one more question. In this age of AI, of automation, of all this rapid technological change, How do we even know what competencies will be valuable in the future?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that everyone should be thinking about, whether you're a CEO
Yeah.
planning for the next 10 years or someone just starting out in their career.
It feels like we need a crystal ball. But seriously, are there any clues in the article that can help us figure this out?
Well, the article doesn't specifically talk about AI, but it does emphasize adaptability. It emphasizes foresight. The companies that succeed, they're not just reacting to change, they're anticipating it.
So how do we do that? How do we anticipate the skills we're going to need when the world is changing so fast?
It starts with awareness, being aware of the trends that are shaping our world. We talked about those human skills, creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence. Those will continue to be valuable no matter how advanced technology becomes.
Because those are the things that machines can't replicate, at least not yet. That's what makes us human.
Exactly. And it's not just about having those skills, it's about continually honing them. The future belongs to those who are lifelong learners, people who are always looking for new knowledge and always adapting to new challenges.
It's like that idea of building a strategic architecture for companies. Maybe we each need a personal strategic architecture for our own development.
I love that idea. It's about being really intentional about your strengths and weaknesses, identifying areas where you need to grow, and being proactive about finding opportunities to learn and develop.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes. It's changed how I think about what it takes to be successful in the long run. It's not just about what you know today. It's about your ability to learn, to adapt, to evolve. It's about cultivating those core competencies that will make you invaluable no matter what the future holds.
And it's a reminder that this is a journey. It's not a destination. The world of work is constantly changing. And so should we embrace the challenge, stay curious, never stop learning.
What's so exciting is that this article, it's about businesses, but it gives us this framework for thinking about personal growth too. It's about being intentional about the skills we build, recognizing that they're not just job requirements, they're valuable assets that we carry with us throughout our lives.
It's the beauty of these timeless principles.
Yeah.
They could go beyond specific industries or job titles. It's about having a mindset of continuous learning and growth. And that applies to everyone.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
We've explored core competencies from every angle, from corporate strategy to individual development. We've looked at case studies, we've debated different approaches, and hopefully we've sparked some new ideas for our listeners.
I've really enjoyed diving into this topic with you. It's always fascinating to explore these ideas.
We've covered a lot, but I think the most important thing is for our listeners to walk away with a sense of possibility, no matter what challenges they face or what the future holds. Their core competencies are a source of strength, a source of resilience.
So true.
It's about recognizing those strengths, nurturing them, and using them to navigate this ever-changing world.
Beautifully said. Embrace your core competencies. Stay curious and never stop learning. That's the key to thriving in the long run.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today. We'll be back next week with another thought-provoking exploration. Until then, keep diving deep.
Sounds good.
You know, we've talked a lot about core competencies for both companies and individuals, but here's the thing that keeps coming back to me. This article is from 1990. It's even more relevant today. But what about tomorrow? In a world of, AI, automation, rapid change, how do we even know which competencies will be valuable in the future?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's something everyone's grappling with, whether you're running a company or just starting your career.
It feels like we need a crystal ball, but seriously, any insights from this article that can help us?
Well, the article doesn't mention AI specifically, but it does stress adaptability and foresight. The companies that thrive, they're not just reacting to change, they're out there anticipating it.
So how do we even do that? Anticipate what we'll need when everything's changing so fast?
I think it starts with paying attention to those broader trends shaping the world. We've talked about those human skills, creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence. Those will always be valuable, no matter how advanced technology gets.
Because those are the things machines can't do, at least not yet. The things that make us human.
Exactly. And it's not just about having those skills, it's about constantly getting better at them. The future belongs to those who are always learning, always looking for new knowledge, always adapting to new situations.
It's like the article's idea of a strategic architecture for companies. Maybe we all need a personal one for our own development.
I love that, a personal strategic architecture, thinking critically about what you're good at, where you need to improve, And then being proactive,
Yeah.
seeking out those opportunities to learn and grow.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. It's changed how I think about what it means to be successful. It's not just what you know right now. It's about your ability to learn and adapt and evolve, to cultivate those competencies that'll make you valuable, no matter what the future brings.
And it's a journey, not a destination. The world of work is always changing, and we need to change with it. Embrace the challenge. Be curious. Never stop learning.
What's so great is this article, while it's about businesses, it gives us a framework for personal growth, too.
Absolutely.
It's about being intentional with the skills we build, realizing that they're not just for a job, they're valuable assets. We carry them with us throughout our lives.
That's what's so powerful about these principles. They go beyond industries or job titles. It's about a mindset of continuous learning and growth. And that's relevant to everyone.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
Yeah, it's been great.
We've explored core competencies from every angle, corporate strategy to individual growth, analyzed case studies, debated different approaches, and hopefully given our listeners some new ideas to think about.
It's always a pleasure to dive into these topics. I always learn something new.
We've covered so much, but I hope the biggest takeaway for our listeners is that they have the power to shape their own future, no matter the challenges or what the future holds. Their core competencies are a source of strength and resilience.
That's so important.
It's about recognizing those strengths, nurturing them, and using them to navigate this ever-changing world.
Beautifully said. Embrace those core competencies. Stay curious. Never stop learning. That's how we thrive.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep diving deep.